Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be an awesome interview with my friend Aaron. He's been an amazing inspiration for me. Whenever I get lazy and don't want to work out, I always think, what would Aaron do? Aaron is not only a veteran, he's also an ultra marathon runner. He's a father, speaker. He does it all, and he has a couple businesses, but also, guys, he ran the Badwater 135, being blind and deaf, and he is an unstoppable human being, and that's what we're going to talk about today: how to become unstoppable. Aaron, my brother, welcome to the show.
What's up, Richard? Thank you very much for having me again.
I love it. And you're one of the only people I've ever had on multiple times. But we're going to be talking about what you're up to now. But give us a quick breakdown about where you come from and where did you grow up and why you joined the military.
I'm a Midwestern guy. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, the burbs, kind of a Norman Rockwell kind of, autumns, apple bobbing and hay rides and all that kind of stuff. Football, and I loved it. But of course, I um, I was kind of an all-American slacker. Yeah, so I just I didn't pick up the whole hard work ethic. It was the military that instilled that and a whole bunch more in me. So I gotta credit, the military for really giving me, resilience and just appreciation for hard work's sake. And then, of course, to be able to face challenges head on, which definitely came in handy later.
Now, most people in the military join one branch. You actually joined two branches. So why did you join your first branch and why did you pick that branch?
Well, like I said, I wasn't real ambitious, didn't have goals. And I went to college because that was what was supposed to be done after high school. Right, you go to college and you get a good degree, and then you get a good job and make money, start a family, and work towards that pension or something. Um, and when I got to college, and I had no idea what I was supposed to be studying, and really no motivation to do it. So I kind of went looking for Animal House, found it, and created it myself. Um, but then after about 3 semesters and nothing to show for it except the freshman 50, um, I was out on my butt and really embarrassed, really ashamed. When I, it's funny that about a month before I'd enlisted, my entire life I'd absolutely known that I'd never be in the military, but I needed to get my life turned around and get those, internal values and get learn all that stuff the military would teach you. Plus, get that tuition I just wasted back. So GI Bill, military training. But when it came down to which branch, I didn't really know much about the military. I just knew at that point in my life that I didn't want to be like a shooter, an infantry guy. So it kind of ruled out for me entirely half of the military branches, the Army and the Marines. I just didn't even consider it because that's what I thought they did. So then it was the Air Force or the Navy, and the Air Force was airplanes. I did also, again, I didn't know. So, but I'd grown up with those Navy recruiting commercials, right? The let the journey begin, let the adventure begin, that kind of stuff. I love travel and I love different cultures and languages and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to be a chef. That's my ambition at the time. So I would decided I was going to join the Navy as a cook, get the OJT, get that GI Bill, 4 years and out, and I can go to a professional culinary school and become a chef.
And how did that work out for you?
Well, it turned out pretty well. I got top of my class in the Navy cooking school, which is really just learning how to not kill everybody on the ship, but not really about culinary arts. Except when I got to my first duty station, it was shore duty in Italy. I didn't realize at the time, but they, they considered Navy cooks the military equivalent of hotel restaurant management. So I learned real quick that we don't cook on shore. We only cook out at sea on ships. On shore, they have civilian contractors on bases that run the chow halls. So where do they put us? The hotel or military, version, the barracks. So I was the FNG at the night, desk watch at the, bachelor enlisted quarters. I was handing out, card keys and taking in trouble call tickets, that kind of thing. However, about 2 years, I did that for 2 years, worked my way up to the maintenance department, and I started escorting the local national Italian around, the public works guys to handle those trouble call tickets. And the whole time I was escorting them into their, these barracks rooms, I was pointing out everything, going, "Come si dice? Come si dice? How do you say that? How do you say that?" I was learning Italian. Of course, I was learning it from these Napolitan roughnecks, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. So it wasn't exactly book Italian I was learning, but I was enjoying myself. And then 2 years later, after I'd gotten to Naples, I did get my next duty station was cooking for the commander of the Sixth Fleet, aboard the flagship, the USS LaSalle. So I went from barracks duty to cooking for a 3-star and his top brass. So that was pretty cool.
So how many years did you do in the Navy?
I spent a total of about 8 years in the Navy. Of course, I joined in '99. It was a time of peace. But then, of course, that was almost right after getting to Italy. Um, we were thrust into one war. Soon thereafter, we were in 2 wars. And I I picked up those skills, like the hard work, the ethics behind achievement and setting goals for myself. And I've got some more. I accidentally picked up those external goals and skills and values like duty, pride in being part of something bigger than myself, and being part of a bigger team, and and dedication to service, to giving more than I take. Uh, when I used, I think I just got to the point where I love cooking and I loved being in Italy, which is definitely not a hardship duty. Uh, Cooking for the admiral and living in Naples, Gaeta, Italy, but with the war going on and this appreciation for duty and service, I decided I wanted to do something that was a little more direct, a little more, uh, do more with the skills and abilities and natural talents that I had. So that's when I decided to deploy. I volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan for the first time. That's where I met some EOD technicians, explosive ordnance disposal, and uh, it was amazing. These guys have an incredible job. They're first responders on the battlefield. And they calmly, purposefully walk into a situation where everybody else is trying to get the heck out. It's a tight knit brotherhood within the military, and um, Well, it's the technical aspect of it. You have to be physically and mentally agile and attuned. So everything about it just screamed that that's what I needed to do. Of course, the Navy. I don't know if they liked my cooking or just manpower said that they didn't want me to, get promoted or change jobs. They said uh, they denied my request to go EOD because they weren't taking cooks into the EOD program. But when my contract or my deployment was up in Afghanistan, my contract was coming up, so I had the choice of whether I wanted to re-enlist or walk, and I walked. I took my service record over to an Army recruiter. I said, "Here, I want to go EOD." Of course, with 2 wars going on, they were more than glad to take me.
So once you went through EOD training, did they send you to Iraq or Afghanistan again?
Yes, right. Almost immediately after going through kind of a cut down version of basic Army basic training, and then almost a year to the it was exactly a year of EOD training. uh, I got I got assigned to a company in Fort Drum, New York, upstate New York, and almost within a couple months I was in Iraq. um, I got to keep my rank. Went from petty officer to sergeant, but I still had a lot to learn about being both Army and being an EOD technician. But as a sergeant, I'm expected to have just kind of a higher level of experience. So I was first assigned as a team sergeant to another sergeant, um, to learn, as a mentor, um, and to be his protege. And then also got assigned to the Task Force Troy Counter Explosives Exploitation Cell. It's like the CSI of the battlefield, where all the EOD teams send their evidence. And we collect evidence off the battlefield. We find an IED or something out there, and we take what's necessary, like the um, explosive samples, tape, the fingerprints, all that kind of stuff, and we send it up. And I did what was called triage. I got to separate the different components and send them off, packaged just right to the various chemical analysis, biometrics, electronics, all that kind of stuff. And it would then get turned into a storyboard, which would get sent out to all of our intelligence agencies.
So how did your first your tour in Iraq go? How did that go? How did you get along in that first tour?
It went very well. I learned quite a bit, and it um, prepared me for my third deployment, my second as an EOD tech, and it was my first as a team leader to when I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. I had my own team, and the lessons I learned in Iraq certainly came in handy in Afghanistan.
Well, you get to Afghanistan, and after a while, shit goes sideways. Talk to us about your whole situation when shit went sideways in Afghanistan.
Well, we were in the Kandahar province, the Zaray district, which is a little bit west of Kandahar proper, and it's a hotbed. It was the birthplace of the Taliban. And I was supporting a 4-4 Cav out of Fort Riley in a little town called Sia Choi, which I asked the Terp what that meant, and he said, "I think it means cemetery." And it kind of felt like we were in Tombstone, except instead of bullets whizzing all over around us, it was IEDs scattered all over the place. Somebody described it as every step you took was a deliberate act, and that's really how it felt. Everything it was there wasn't a whole lot of creativity in the IEDs. It was just quantity. There were these pressure plates made out of plywood and some lamp cord attached to a 9-volt battery and a vegetable oil jug of homemade explosive. That's it. Not a whole lot of variation on that, but there were so many all over the place. And my team was running them all over all the time. We'd also do a lot of post blast analysis after somebody unfortunately found it the painful way. And then about 8 months into this 12-month deployment, one of them found me. I just came back from 2 weeks of R&R back at stateside. I had 2 weeks of leave. Got to see my family gathered around the table for Thanksgiving. Got to see my firstborn turn 1. It was a great last page in the mental photo album. My team had picked me up in an armored truck, and we were jumping into a supply convoy, heading back out to Sea of Troy, when the patrol leader said, "Hey, EOD, we got something on the side of the road up ahead. I need you to take a look." So I tossed the luggage off the robot out of the truck. We got to work. And yeah, it was a pressure plate, jug, 9-volt battery, the whole nine. So it made short work of it with the robot, but I wanted to grab that evidence. So I jumped out of the truck and I made my way towards that ID about, I don't know, 20 meters or so from the original ID. There was a secondary device that hadn't yet been detected. And that thing punted me into the air. I landed on my knees and elbows, and the lights had gone out. Of course, I thought that my helmet had gotten pushed over my face, but the first thing I wanted to do was the functions check, wiggle the fingers and toes and all that, make sure everything was still where I left it. And it was strange, but it seemed like I was virtually untouched from the neck down. So I figured I could just get right back in the fight. So I reached up to fix my helmet and to find that the thing was gone. And that's when I thought, oh no, this is bad. My first sergeant is gonna kill me for losing that. Anyways, that's when I definitely realized that I'd taken some injury, and my team grabbed me and dragged me back to the safe area. Then I was on a medevac chopper heading right back to Kandahar, and within 48 hours, I was at Walter Reed, and the doctors were telling me that I'd be blind for the rest of my life.
So, and we've talked about this before because we've been friends for years. We talk every week, at least once or twice a week. But what was it like? Because I remember when I lost my vision, and I remember sitting there not being able to see anything, and just
You
so
know,
many thoughts are going through my head. So talk.
oh,
What was your thoughts?
it's almost cliche, but almost embarrassing to admit it. But I went through those phases of loss, of grief, right? Denial, bartering, anger, all that stuff. And I was going. The thing is, the first somebody's asked, "What was the first thing that went through your mind when you got injured?" I said, "Blast overpressure." But the truth is, when I got to Walter Reed, I didn't have a whole lot of um, time during the day to really reflect on what was going on. It was a whirlwind of doctors and nurses and army bureaucracy and elected officials and nonprofits coming and going, my family coming in. It was always something. And also, I didn't. I quickly learned that when you go fully blind, you also get the bonus gift of a sleep disorder called non-24, and because you can't reset your internal clock, this circadian rhythm, it's kind of like living on a 26-hour clock. So during the day, I was dog tired, like zombie tired. And then at night, I could not turn my head off. I couldn't go to sleep. Because, of course, it's not like you can just close your eyes because, well, now they're always closed, but then there's no way to kind of trigger that sleep thing. So I was wide awake. And that was when I was stuck with my thoughts. And it was all those, I call them my demons, right? The what ifs, the why me's, and all the things that I can't do or be. All the plans that I had, all the things I said I would get to someday, all that stuff is out of reach now, out of sight. So that's the kind of stuff that was going through my mind. How much of a failure I was because I missed it. This low tech Taliban got one over on me, and I wasn't supposed to be. I was supposed to be part of the, you know, most well trained, well funded, best bomb technicians in the whole world, and a pressure plate with a jug and 9-volt battery got me.
So for me, I know my low point was when they told me, Sergeant Kaufman, you can no longer see, you can no longer shoot, we don't need you. And they medically discharged me. And when they told me that I'm no longer Sergeant Kaufman, that kind of destroyed me. So, what was that like knowing that um, you're not going to be Staff Sergeant Hale for much longer?
They didn't say it like that. In fact, they just kind of made these assumptions, but at the same time, they just kind of said, "Where do you want to retire?" And by the time that question had come around, I was already training. I was already learning how to use my accessible, uh, smartphone, computer, that kind of stuff. And I was getting on the internet and searching stuff like blind plus outside, blind plus running, blind plus climbing, anything to get my butt out of the bed. And I was learning about like guys like Eric Weinmeier, who was the first blind person to climb Mount Everest, and Lonnie Bedwell, who's the first blind person to kayak the entire Grand Canyon. And I found out that there were actually a handful of active duty blind soldiers out there, like Ivan Castro, who'd even earned his commission and uh, was active duty at the Army's Special Operation Recruiting Branch at Fort Bragg, and Captain Scott Smiley, who became a company commander of a warrior transition unit, basically, a wounded warrior company. And these guys were all doing these amazing things, and it helped me turn around all that negative thinking, all those the demons that were telling me that my life was over. And I was saying, okay, instead of I can't, it was like I can, but how can I? And if these guys could stay active duty, well, how can I? And I knew that, of course, I couldn't be an EOD technician any longer, couldn't do the job. They don't even like it when you're colorblind, the whole red wire, green wire thing. But uh, I could instruct. So when they came around to say, where do you want to retire? I just said I don't. And I told them my plan. I said I want to go get sent to Eglin Air Force Base to the Navy EOD school there, because the Navy school is where all branches send their EOD students to become EOD techs. And I had no idea what kind of red tape it would be sending a wounded soldier to a Navy school on an Air Force base. But they made it happen, and I became an instructor for about a year and a half. I was down at Eglin in the Florida Panhandle. And, well, eventually I did take my retirement. Uh, I'm still here in the Panhandle.
So, you know, so now you're just you're I'm not saying just, I mean, but you're blind at this time, and then eventually a little bit later you get sick again and you lose your
Mhm.
hearing. So because a lot of times when one sense is diminished, the a lot of the other senses get heightened. So now you're down one sense. What happened to your hearing?
Well, of course, with the blast, I'd lost some of my hearing. They'd actually blown out both my eardrums, and I even had to get what's called a tympanoplasty, where, because your eardrum, even if it's perforated, blown out, it will heal and close up on its own sometimes. But my right ear was pretty well damaged, so they had to do basically a skin graft over the eardrum to replace it. Uh, However, it was pretty extensive hearing loss in my right ear, but my left ear was pretty good. So for the next 4 years or so, I was I was doing my best to be becoming the best blind Aaron Hale I could be. I I sought out Eric Weinmayer and went mountain climbing with him. I sought out Lonnie and I went kayaking with him. I started running, and I was running marathons, and uh, basically, making the best of my situation. And I was actually starting to do more uh, with, I guess, with my potential than I had been, before losing my eyesight. But yeah, in 2015, because the injury was in 2011. Besides losing my eyes, the blast had also cracked my skull, and it had been patched up, but I guess there was still some openings, still cracked in my sinuses, and I contracted bacterial meningitis in the summer of 2015. So 10 years ago, uh, I found myself right back in the hospital, and the bacteria was actually brought me closer to death than the bomb blast had. And through the ordeal, it stole what was left of my hearing, and it left me totally, completely deaf. My ears, to this day, are totally turned off, and the only way uh, I can hear is through this one cochlear implant in my left ear. Um, the Like I said, the damage to my right ear was so extensive that the cochlear implant couldn't even help. Oh, speaking of bonus gifts, the sleep disorder with the blindness. When I lost my hearing, I got the bonus gift of losing my um, sense of balance, the vestibular balance, that inner ear gyro. So when people ask me, do my other senses get sharper? They're falling off all over the place. The only thing that's sharper than ever is my sense of humor.
First, we have Nicholas says, "Thank you for sharing your story. I look forward to seeing all that you do in the future." So thank you, Nicholas, for watching and hanging out with us today. So
Yeah,
now,
welcome.
not only are you blind, now you're deaf, and we didn't even talk about the traumatic brain injury. And loss of memory and stuff like that. So talk to us about the TBI, because a lot of us, including me, have a TBI, and that can be challenging also. So now you have three different things going on, correct?
Hmm. Well, I do definitely glaze over that in the story because, well, frankly, there was so much. So, the cracked skull, the leaking spinal fluid, loss of my eyes, loss of my hearing, balance, sleep disorder, and uh, from the beginning, I mean, even before they'd flown me from overseas, I had to spend 24 hours in Landstuhl before they felt it safe to do the transatlantic flight because of the altitude, the pressure change, because my brain was swelling. It was so that had to be monitored. I spent about, I don't know, it was 5 or 6 weeks at Walter Reed. But by the time my face and my eyes had healed up enough, there really wasn't anything they could do for me there at in Bethesda. So they actually sent me down to James A. Haley, the VA hospital in Tampa, where they have a polytrauma center. And I spent a couple weeks at the spinal cord and TBI center. Um, for me, though, thankfully, uh, I think it will. Looking back, no pun intended. I could tell that there were some more behavioral, maybe decision making uh, things. It was a lot going on. Uh, the whole change of life scenario. It was a very surreal experience from the beginning, but my decision making power wasn't incredible. So I can definitely tell at moments where I just didn't use great judgment. But when it came to memory, it, there was it was a neurosurgeon came in and gave me one of those uh, mental acuity tests. Of course, I couldn't do the visual part, but he did a verbal version of it. And asking all those kind of questions, like I'm going to give you a series of words. You tell me how many of them you remember, which ones were the pieces of furniture, which ones were vehicles, which one were animals, and I would just start reciting them back to him. Those kind of questions where okay, go through the alphabet from A to Z and just but with names of animals. Who wrote Alice in Wonderland? These kind of questions, right? So comes back a couple days later and goes, "All right, I got your scores, and you got a 99th percentile in general knowledge, 99th percentile in mathematics, and a 96th percentile in memory. So I think we can get you out of here in the next couple days." And me being the EOD tech that I was, I said, "Can we do it again? I can get it. I can do better." So it was just this kind of competitive spirit of mine. But thankfully, what it proved was that I hadn't lost my memory or that mental acuity, which or at least it did come back. So I'm very glad about that.
Well, Deborah Green says, "What an amazing story." So thank you, Deborah, for hanging out with us today. So because when we eventually we're no longer in the military, we kind of have to reinvent and reimagine our life again. Um, so talk to us about what some of the first steps you took in reinventing and reimagining yourself as a civilian.
Well, I'll tell you what. One of the things that the military and EOD in particular taught me was that you had to make do with what you've got. And There's, mission failure is not an option. If things being hard were never a good excuse for mission failure. So, each EOD team, at least in the Army, we go in three-person teams, and we get this big shipping containers, like quad cons, tricons. They're like, uh, you know, they're big. They're like a size of a room full of all the tools that an EOD tech might need on the battlefield to to mitigate the hazard in anything that goes boom, from nuclear weapons to bullets. So if you imagine the bomb suits, robots, hazmat sets, decontamination kits, all that stuff. And then when you get into the battlefield, you get this armored truck called the Jerv, and it's not as big as the shipping container. So you got to leave some tools behind. You do a bit of a triage, leave behind some of the things that you're probably not going to need, uh, and to fit the stuff that you're more likely going to need. And then when we get to Afghanistan, there's no roads anywhere. So we would have to go on foot to get to most places. So you have to leave behind a lot more tools. And we would end up having to do the same job on the battlefield with a rope, some carabiners, a knife, or standard battle rattle, water, food, and all that, a few blocks of C4. But we'd still have to do the job. So when I took that same kind of mentality towards my situation after the military, so I had to leave some tools behind. I still am a husband, a father, still at heart a soldier and dedicated to service. Now it's serving my fellow veterans, serving others that are going through challenges in their lives. So I took every challenge as just that. Every obstacle along the way is a puzzle to solve. Um, so everything just became a whole new adventure. Started to do mountain climbing, kayaking, running, um, speaking, and talking about this perspective. How could a blind deaf guy, after being blown up and almost dying from bacterial meningitis, how could he have a smile on his face? How's that even possible? And how is he doing these things? If I can share my perspective, then my own life, it becomes more fulfilling when I'm helping others. So that
All right,
became
so
my mission.
let me ask you a question, because I know that one day I had full vision. Um, I was working out every day, doing competitive bodybuilding, competitive mixed martial arts. The next day, I'm blind and I don't even know the way around my house. And my wife had to do everything for me. And I felt like so much less of a man, because one day I can do everything, the next day I can't even feed myself. So, and
Hmm.
I kind of felt like half of a man at some points in my life, which of course I had a couple of suicide attempts. But talk to us about what it was like to come home and never being able to see your wife's face again, and having to go through that mental stuff that, wait a minute, here I am, I was an EOD tech, I was kicking ass and taking names. Now I don't even know my way around the kitchen. What was that like?
It was definitely a hard pill to swallow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're strong, independent, hard charging, kick ass soldiers. Uh, and EOD techs they come in a couple different flavors, but altogether, we're kind of like these alpha nerds, right? The go-getters that are both fit and smart to be able to do the kind of job they do. So to be reduced to this blind guy, this blind deaf guy, and not being able to, step out the front door and go for a walk, right? Uh, when I came back from the hospital after the meningitis, I came home in a wheelchair. I had to hold on to my counter to not fall off the stool. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I had to deal with this, what felt very emasculating, very helpless. And I had to lean on my family, lean on friends and neighbors to be able to do it. But you know what the truth is, life life is hard. Sometimes we don't get to choose our hard. Sometimes we do. And I had been choosing my hard by doing the military, becoming an EOD technician. I was choosing my hard when uh, I started mountain climbing and running and training. And when a challenge came to me that wasn't of my choosing, at least I'd been I've been preparing for it without knowing. And while yes, I had to swallow that mental pill of losing those couple tools I had to leave behind, uh, it was a mental thing. I'd already been ready. I just had to shift my gears, my perspective to a whole different life. This is what it is. And one of the other things was you can turn you can have excuses or you can have reasons. And the problem is excuses get you nowhere, right? There are reasons to fail, reasons to give up. If I if I left, if I just stuck around and just used my excuses, I could never answer this one question. Then what? Okay, I'm blind, I'm deaf, I'm here, balance, sleep disorder, all this stuff. The TBI, I'm sitting on that stool on the breakfast bar at the counter. Then what? So instead of crying about it, and yeah, you gotta mourn, you gotta have that period, you gotta go through those phases of grief. But then what? So there was no question. There wasn't any question for me. I had to get back to work. I had to do something. I
Well,
had to find continue
you
mission.
and don't you think, like once I realized, all right, I had my head run over by a Humvee, an Up Arbor Humvee. My whole body was ran over. I got up from that. I survived. If I can survive that, I can survive anything. You become kind of you're in your mind. For me, I became kind of like, okay, now what? I can get through anything if I've gotten through this. It kind of became my superpower. Now, did you have you ever felt that way? You're like, okay, just because I'm blind, I'm deaf, I have a TBI, that doesn't mean I can't be a great father. It doesn't mean I can't run the Badwater 135. It doesn't mean I can't be a podcaster. It kind of became your superpower in a way, right?
you know, I've told the joke in the past, or when we were kids, we thought we were invincible, right? And then I
Yeah.
took a bomb blast to the head and proved it.
Yep.
But you're right. It, I mean, of course, there are always physical limitations, but there are no limitations to your potential and the strength of your willpower and determination. And sometimes just changing the way we frame our world, the way we open up the window to the world and just have a new perspective on things changes everything.
Okay, so now you climbed the mountains, you've ran marathons. What and I know and I'm going to ask this because I asked you this before, but I'm going to ask you because I had so many people that I said I was going to have you on the show today. They're gonna like, you got to tell me first of all why, and then second of all how do you run a marathon or a Badwater 135 being blind and deaf? How does it mechanically happen? First of all,
Well, How? Then why?
Do you have a guide that runs with you, or how does that work?
Well, you were a bodybuilder, right?
Yep.
You don't start by benching 350 pounds. How do you
Yep.
start benching? How do you start maxing out your squats or whatever? You start with smaller weights, maybe lower
Yep.
reps. You start at the beginning. And now I might have bitten off a little more than I could chew right at the beginning. Is after I talked to Ivan Castro, that the blind army ranger. He's the one who convinced me to start running. Um, he'd always made it a point to run the Air Force Marathon, the Army 10 miler, and the Marine Corps Marathon every year. I thought, wow, that's patriotic. Pretty cool. You know what? I'll do that too. And I registered for all three of those, and somehow got talked into a couple more marathons. And I turned, all of a sudden, I found myself, I was registered for four marathons and the 10 miler, all within the span of 4 months. And I'd never run anything longer than a 10K in my life. So the how was get started and find a coach, get connected with other people that are doing what you want to do. So I got a running coach who gave me, a training plan. I sought out a local group, actually it was Team Red, White, and Blue, a veteran service organization, and I reached out to them and said, "Hey, I want to start running, but it's really bad for my health to just lace up and step out the front door on my own." So they started organizing a Aaron's marathon training day, and a whole bunch of these eagles would come out and run with me. And the cool part about that is that once a week it would be Aaron's marathon training day, but more and more people came out, and it just became marathon training day, and anybody could just join at whatever ability and distance they wanted, and it was just a running day. I think that's still going on today, even though I might not be part of it. It feels good to have been a part of it. But then, you know, like how do you make change in your life? You take those first steps, and you try to measure it, pace yourself so that you're not overdoing it and getting discouraged when inevitably you would like burn out. Just you just keep at it. You stay disciplined and determined, and you just do it every single day. You get mentors, coaches, and other people around you that are doing it and can help lift you up, and you lift them up. And the marathon turned into my first ultra marathon, which was a 12 hour. I did about 50 miles or so. And then I started looking further and did a few 100 milers. And those qualified me. You can't just register for Badwater. Uh, in fact, you have to run a minimum of three 100-mile ultra marathons just to qualify to apply to be invited to Badwater. And um, that's that works for those simple methodologies work for just about any goal in your life, right? Don't try to do it alone. Don't try to do it all at once. Find experts that are doing it and ask, figure out how they're doing it and do it with them.
Okay, but then not only are you a father, you have amazing children. You you were a you had a real estate company. You had EOD, your own food company, and you're also doing speaking, podcasting. So how do you? Because a lot of people would think, okay, I'm I'm just gonna if they lost their vision, they're just gonna sit home, collect their check. But you kind of you become the master of it all. So how do you go about having the discipline to have a business, two businesses, to have a podcast, to be a father? How do you get put your days together? Do you have a scheduler? And how was that starting out trying to figure out a new schedule?
Well, for almost everything except the parenting part itself, I found that uh, yeah, I haven't even mentioned this, but well before all of the injuries and illnesses and all that stuff, I kind of have attention deficit disorder or ADHD that just runs in the family. My dad is dyslexic, my brother also. So, uh, one, I can't just sit still. I can't not do things. And when I was retired, I couldn't just not do things. So it was actually the fudge company came out of a kitchen therapy, so to speak. I just started cooking a lot, and all of a sudden we were like, before we knew it, we had a fudge company, Extraordinary Delights, or EODfudge.com. But also with that, I realized that if I try to do everything myself, I am already a huge bottleneck. Then add the blindness and the deafness onto that. And I have accessible computers and all that kind of stuff. But um, no matter how good I get at the text to speech software on my computer, I'm still somebody with eyes is still going to be 10 times faster on a computer than me. But I don't have to do it alone, and I shouldn't. So I start a business. I start, investing in real estate or whatever it is. I hire people that are experts at what they do, and I either can't do, am not good at, shouldn't do, or just don't like doing, and I let them do it even better than me. And the thing is that I'm not asking for help. It's not like I'm um, you know, coming from the victim point of view, like I should be able to do this myself. No, I'm coming from this business owner who's creating jobs. And yes, I have a virtual assistant who's fantastic, and she helps me keep the emails and the calendars and my podcast guests organized and informed because that kind of stuff. Like I'm, I'm tragically incapable of keeping that organized. So I hire somebody who is really good at organizing things and loves doing that. And that, same with the real estate. Maybe I could swing a hammer, but I remember even before I lost my sense of eyesight, right? I could not make like carpentry or whatever. I cannot make a square angle to save my life. I like working with my hands, but somebody else, either they're contractors that's what they do. They like doing it. They're really good at it, and they want to make money doing it. Well, you know what? I get myself out of the bottleneck. And if I tried to do all the stuff with a fudge business, a real estate business, with a speaking business, with a podcast, then I wouldn't have any time at all for my own fitness or being that parent that I really want to be.
And when you hired me as your podcast coach, um, I
Exactly
felt
right.
very intimidated. I felt very intimidated because how do I teach a guy that is blind and is deaf? And I spent many nights awake praying to the Lord. I'm like, Lord, just let me provide enough value. So, what made you want to start a podcast? Because a lot of people would say, wait a minute, you're deaf and you're blind. How are you going to start a podcast? But that's exactly what you did with Point of Impact. So, talk about your podcast.
Why did I want to start a podcast? Well, I didn't
Yep.
want to be the only one without one. I'm just kidding. No, just like um, I was telling you earlier about being able to share the story with others that might be going through, their challenges of their own, and all they might need is a little perspective change. Yeah, I started speaking and telling my story because I was once told, or maybe I read it in a meme somewhere, that the it may be one day your story, the story of your struggle, might be another's blueprint for survival. And I really took that to heart. So I can tell an audience of 50 or 100 or 1,000, and I could start a podcast. And who knows how many tens or hundreds or maybe millions I can eventually, reach if I just have a good enough podcast and I have the right message. So again, I'm trying my darndest to be, a great podcaster. And if I want to be the best, I gotta hire the best. So I find the right coach, right?
And then, but now you just had a great speaking gig in Tampa. You got another speaking gig coming up. So now you're actually starting to get out there a little bit more, getting these speaking gigs. So what is it like speaking in front of all these people that you can't see?
One hand washes the other, right? I speak, and of course, I'll mention my podcast while I'm speaking, vice versa. While I'm podcasting, I might happen to mention the speaking, and I'll get more invitations to events in the future. Yeah, the event in Tampa was fantastic. It was for a great cause, the Florida's National Veteran Cemetery. And uh, yeah, I've got a few events coming up this year, but it's funny. I've become very comfortable behind a podium. I have practiced my story to the point where I can custom tailor my anecdotes, my stories, the lessons I've learned to the audience, the theme of the event, and train others, do breakout sessions, all that kind of stuff, because it's actually a lot like being an EOD technician and giving briefs to commanding officers, or uh, doing those sergeant time trainings, like the hip pocket trainings.
Yeah.
So I'm very comfortable with that. My latest challenge is getting behind the microphone and talking off the cuff to the ether when going live. So that's the next challenge I'm uh, I'm trying to tackle.
And not only that, but you also just started a brand new Facebook group. Let's talk about that a little bit.
That's right. Well, it's the work in collaboration with the Point of Impact podcast. I started the Disruptor Nation Facebook group, and it's a companion to the podcast. It's where uh, former guests, the audience members, just about anybody can come, collaborate, lift each other up, share some of the challenges they're going through, and comment on the show, or even offer me some recommendations on future shows or guests.
So this is a teaching podcast. So if there's somebody that is like us, where we get injured and we have to reimagine and get used to our new normals, but also push the envelope to get better normals, what would be your top three pieces of advice to injured soldiers to to make their lives even better after service?
Number one thing I would say is, don't let your service be the greatest thing you do. Your time in uniform is might have been the most amazing time of your life, might have been some of the hardest or worst part of your life, but it's a phase of your life. And once you're going through this transition, whether it's chosen by you or for you, don't let it be the best part of your life. There's still life to live, and still plenty of potential left in you. Next, I would say start with a vision. What is that life you want to live look like? Who do you want to be with? What kind of relationship do you want to have with them? What do you want to be doing that leaves you fulfilled? Where do you want to go, and who do you want to be? And that's how you start your plan. How far out, 3 years or 5 years, and you start planning backwards. What do I need to do to get there? And then third is, like I said, don't do it alone. Uh, don't keep it a secret. Even if it might be, it might, and it's funny to say this from a grown man, EOD technician, to say that I was bashful. It's tough to share your vulnerability, right? To say, I don't know how to do this, and I don't think I can do it alone. There was a year and a half where I was trying to figure out how to start a podcast until I just started saying, "Hey, I'm trying to do this podcast. I don't know how to I don't know how to set it up. I don't know how to hit I don't even know how to hit record, much less do the editing, publishing, and all that stuff, especially with voiceover, the accessibility stuff." So I started telling people, I want to do this, I don't know how. And people stepped up and said, "Hey, let me help you." And it was just like the real estate and everything else. I found people who were doing it. They could help me do it. I could hire them to get me started. And that's how it works. That's how our society, our culture, that's how humanity works. Nobody lives in a vacuum.
So, last question is, how do we find you? Where do we find your podcast? Where do we? I actually ordered fudge for my wife for Christmas. I just had some yesterday. Oh my god, it is so good. So, how do we find your podcast? How do we find your fudge? How do we find your Facebook group?
Well, you can find the delicious fudge and some other awesome treats at eodfudge.com. And you can find the Point of Impact with Aaron Hale on all your major podcast outlets and YouTube, or go to pointofimpactpod.com. And of course, on Facebook, you can find me in the Facebook group Disruptor Nation.
And you're also on Instagram. So, guys, if you want to follow him on Instagram, he's also on Instagram. Brother, I just want to say thank you for your friendship all these years. And thank you for trusting in me and believing in me and helping me push my game. Especially, I know that when I get out of here, I got to go work out because yesterday, me and you had a coaching session. You came in all sweaty, you did your session, and then you went back out and worked out again. So thank you for motivating me and keeping me on my game.
Well, yeah, very welcome. And thank you for the same thing, being a brother, being a friend, and for your tutelage, your expertise and guidance. Thank you.
I love it. So, guys, as you know, I always end the show. I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And something that he says is every morning we wake up, we can be either a victim or a victor. And if you guys watch this show every week, you're victors of your present and your past, and your future. You're no longer a victim of your past. So thank you guys for always showing up. And remember, vertical momentum. The only way to go is up. I love you guys. Aaron, my brother, have a great week. Keep on kicking ass.
All right, my man. Back at you.